Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by BSF Canada and Syngenta Canada.
Mike Cowbrough here with the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Agribusiness. Once again this year, dandelion control in soybeans was a significant issue for many producers and agronomists. We were dealing with large dandelions. So I want to walk through the best practices of dandelion control in herbicide-tolerant soybeans. That's either the Enlist soybean system or the Xtend soybean system. And I hate to sound like a broken record, but best management of dandelion always starts with control in the fall. That 1.34 liter per acre rate of a glyphosate 540 gram per liter product in the fall provides much better control than if you're trying to deal with that same product in the spring. So that's first and foremost, but recognizing we can't do that sometimes in soybeans. We're planting after corn. Corn gets harvested late, that fall window is closed. So what are the other things that we could do to influence dandelion populations? Well, both tillage and row spacing has a huge impact on dandelion populations. Here's kind of a worst case scenario here. We have no-till soybeans in 30-inch wide rows. And you can see this is an environment that very much favors dandelions. And so let's counter that by looking at a system with tillage and narrow rows. So here's where we have tillage with either vertical tillage or a high-speed disc, then followed with narrow rows spacing, in this case 15-inch rows. And so what the vertical tillage or high-speed disc does is it doesn't give you as good of control as a moldboard plow. So I want to be clear about that, but it does fragment up those roots, and you end up getting more plants initially, but they're smaller and easier to control with herbicides, and we'll get into herbicide solutions later. But basically you get smaller and ultimately fewer dandelions if you incorporate both tillage and narrow rows to kind of outcompete those dandelions. So we have a really good example here where when we pull back the row spacing here, we see less dandelions and just smaller, easier to target. So now that we've looked at the influence of fall control and then the influence of like row spacing and tillage system, let's look at herbicide options. We're first going to look at the Enlist soybean system. So that's soybeans that are tolerant to glyphosate, Liberty, and then also 2,4-D choline. And so the challenge with just relying on, say, a glyphosate or Liberty with 2,4-D and one pass is that we have to remember that dandelions, when they're in the full bloom stage, are in fact probably the most tolerant to herbicides. And so if we just want to go through a soybean field one time with a single product or maybe a combination of glyphosate and 2,4-D or Liberty and 2,4-D, we don't get great control because the dandelions at that stage are typically more tolerant. And we can see that in this plot here. This is Liberty plus 2,4-D ester. It's not horrible control. It's better than our unsprayed check. But because the dandelions were in bloom at the time of application, control is not as good as it can be. So what can we do to enhance control of dandelions in this system? So by far, 2 passes through the field in order to control dandelions has proven to be the best way to maximize control. And this one treatment here stands out, and we have a nice comparison to our unsprayed check. It's where we go with a soil applied treatment of Canopy Pro. So that's Classic plus Sencor. Both of those active ingredients give us both contact and residual control of dandelion. And then we can clean it up later if we get any secondary flushes. So you'll notice here our unsprayed check, we have pretty good big dandelion pressure, but then as we move in to that Canopy Pro pre-emergent treatment, followed by a late post application of Liberty and 2,4-D, we have perfect dandelion control. So now we're going to look at the Xtend soybean system. So again, those are soybeans that are tolerant to both glyphosate and dicamba. And so again here, this is just a single pass of glyphosate. One of the challenges with glyphosate in the spring is that if you're targeting dandelions that are blooming, they're more tolerant. And so even if we go with a high rate, 1.34 liters per acre, we should get better control than what we're seeing here. but it does struggle to control dandelions. So we look at what are other things that we could add or incorporate into the system to notch up the dandelion control. And so one thought is, well, shouldn't dicamba, a synthetic hormone herbicide, be able to improve dandelion control? Well, we looked at that, and that's the next treatment over. And we added the high rate of dicamba to glyphosate, and the control is better, but it's still not acceptable. And so that's where we look to add on to this even furthermore and add Sencor to dicamba and glyphosate, the early post program. And you can see here, early pre-program, and you can see that control when we incorporate dicamba with Sencor and glyphosate in the burn down. We get much better control of dandelion than relying on a single mode of action or even glyphosate and dicamba. So just to summarize what we've learned at this site this year, an integrated system is so important for good weed control. So focusing on fall management because the timing is better to deal with those big perennials. The influence of tillage and row spacing, if you can use those to your benefits, right? Even soil fertility, a healthier, lush crop that canopies closer is going to make these weeds less of an issue. And then focusing on multiple modes of action and multiple passes through the field to deal with this pretty harsh perennial weed. So in the case of the Enlist soybean systems, Canopy Pro pre-emerge and then an Enlist Duo post is a good option, a 2-pass program there. And then an Xtend soys, again, like this combination of dicamba and Sencor or metribuzin pre-emerge certainly sounds a good foundation that you can come back and get really good dandelion control. So again, integrated systems are the best for dandelion management, regardless of what soybean you're growing.